Have you ever stopped to think about how art and learning connect, like how a great story can actually boost practical skills?
Yeah, it's something people might feel intuitively, but there's real substance to it, especially in education.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. We're looking at the academic discussion around using literature, stories, poems in English language classrooms.
Specifically focusing on how it helps with writing skills.
Right. Our mission really is to figure out why using literature might be, well, a kind of shortcut to becoming a better, more insightful writer.
And this isn't just guesswork. We're drawing on a descriptive qualitative analysis. Basically, we've looked at a range of research articles from 2015 to 2021.
So the latest thinking on this.
Exactly. It's about understanding the how and why it works, not just if it works. Gives us a really practical view.
Okay, so let's dig into that core argument. Why literature for language learning, especially for writing?
Well, one of the big findings, pretty consistently, is that literary texts just motivate and engage students um, way more effectively than only using linguistic textbooks.
It makes sense, doesn't it? Stories are just more compelling.
They are, and the research frames it interestingly. Literary genres are seen as a field where language rules can be read in use.
Ah, so not abstract rules, but language in action.
Precisely. It's like the perfect bridge between language structure and human creativity. You see how language actually works, how it flexes, how it creates meaning in a dynamic way.
So when students hit a complex sentence or maybe some tricky grammar in a story, they're hooked on.
They're decoding it for meaning, for the story itself. And almost as a side effect, they're absorbing the structure, the grammar. It feels less like a lesson, more like discovery.
And that touches on another key point, right?
Oh,
Integrating skills instead of separating them.
yes, absolutely. The research really pushes back against siloing skills, reading here, writing there, listening over here.
Receptive versus productive skills.
Exactly. They should be woven together. There's this strong link, often stated as good readers are good writers.
Which feels true anecdotally, too.
It does, and literature naturally encourages that. You read, you might discuss it, which involves listening and speaking, and then you write about it. All four skills working together.
So what is it about literature itself that drives this engagement? You mentioned motivation, but what's the mechanism?
It's what the research calls its provocation and evocation.
Provocation and evocation.
Provocation and evocation.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. A textbook might, define sadness, but a novel lets you experience a character's sadness. It provokes thought, it evokes emotion.
It makes you respond personally.
Exactly. Intellectually and emotionally, you connect your own experiences, you react to the events, the characters, and that process, that's what activates critical thinking. It makes learning feel, well, stimulating, engaging, and genuinely practical.
And you also mentioned that these texts are authentic materials. What's the significance of that? That's a really important benefit. Authentic means it's language written by fluent native speakers for a real purpose, not just manufactured for a language lesson.
So it's the real deal.
It's the real deal. It offers a rich, natural language context. Like you said earlier, it's the difference between a textbook exercise and, say, watching a film in the language you're learning. One feels academic, the other feels alive.
Language in use, as they say.
That sums it up perfectly.
Okay, so we've got motivation, engagement, authenticity. That all sounds great. But let's get down to the nuts and bolts. Does reading stories actually help with, vocabulary lists and grammar rules?
It definitely does, but in a different way. For vocabulary, the big advantage is context.
Right, not just memorizing isolated words.
Exactly. When you encounter a new word in a story you care about, you're motivated to figure it out, to dive deeper, as one study put it, to understand its meaning, because it unlocks the story.
And that context helps it stick, presumably.
Massively. It connects the word to meaning, to emotion, to the narrative. It's much more memorable than a flashcard.
This makes me think about denotation versus connotation. That seems super relevant here.
Hugely relevant. So denotation is just the dictionary definition, right? The literal meaning.
Like flower means the bloom of a plant.
Right. But connotation. So that's all the associated meanings, the feelings, the cultural baggage a word carries.
So flower in a poem might suggest spring or beauty, fragility, maybe even a specific person.
Precisely. It depends on the context, the clues in the text. Literature forces you to think about those layers of meaning, that connotation, and understanding that nuance is absolutely vital for good writing. You need to choose words for their full impact, not just their dictionary meaning.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense for vocabulary. What about grammar? That often feels like the hardest part, the real essence of writing, as some call it.
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The research suggests grammar can actually be acquired unconsciously
Unconsciously. How does that work?
through massive exposure. By reading a lot in the target language, especially well-written literary texts, learners start to internalize the patterns, the structures, the rhythms of correct grammar.
So it's like absorbing it through osmosis.
Kind of, yeah. It's sometimes called internalized reading. Because the grammar structures become second nature, learners can then focus their conscious effort on other aspects of writing, like developing ideas or style or coherence.
Instead of constantly tripping over, is this the right tense? Where does the comma go?
Exactly. Their internal grammar checker gets refined through exposure.
So the literary texts act as models then.
Perfect models. Learners pick up not just grammar, but also things like coherence, unity, how to structure paragraphs, even stylistic elements. Sometimes they might even consciously or unconsciously imitate a writer's style they admire.
And there's research backing this specific link.
Oh yes, studies by Leal, Shenbarton, others, they really highlight this strong connection between reading literature and developing writing proficiency. It's about absorbing the craft by seeing it done masterfully.
It's fascinating. The literature isn't just about the language itself, is it? There's a whole other dimension.
Absolutely. It's a huge part of the benefit. Literature fosters deeper understanding, personal and cultural awareness.
How so?
Well, it exposes learners to such a wide range of experiences, real and imaginative, as one paper put it. You step into other lives, other worlds.
Which can foster a love of reading, generally, I'd imagine.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But it also expands your understanding of, well, the human condition, both your own individual perspective and our collective experiences.
And this connects to empathy, right? That idea